And after going through my own journey, I realized this is life changing. This is amazing medicine, not drugs. It's medicine. And I was angry. Why is this not available and accessible to everybody?
Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. As usual, this episode may not be suitable for all listeners due to language and content, so listen with care and stay safe out there. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life. This week, Lorri and I are talking to Angela Graham-Houweling of the S.I.R.E.N Project. Angela was a career firefighter when she realized that she needed to find more in her search for mental health healing. After being exposed to entheogenic medicine, Angela became obsessed with making this modality available and affordable to all first responders. So, grab those headsets and put those learning caps on. Well, welcome, Angela, to 911 Delta Tethered for Life. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
Lorri
having
and
me.
I really excited to hear about the S.I.R.E.N Project. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
All right. Well, like you said, my name's Angela Graham, just recently married. So Graham-Houweling. I'm a retired firefighter from Santa Clara County. I was there for about 17 years. And I was a firefighter engineer hazmat specialist. And I say that because whenever I tell someone I'm a firefighter, the first question I get is, like, you go into the houses that were on fire? Yes, I did all the same stuff as everybody else. So I was really a firefighter. In my course of working, you see some things. I'm sure you guys as dispatchers know, you hear some things, and not everyone copes with it the same. And it started to take its toll. And after years and years of going to every kind of therapy you can think of, cognitive processing therapy, medication, EMDR was the big thing for people with PTSD. It's supposed to help you process everything. The problem is a lot of first responders learn to dissociate. When you're doing CPR on the 2-year-old, you kind of have to check out. And when you do EMDR, you really have to stay engaged with the emotion and the event that happened. And that can be just too much for some people. They just turn off. So, in my journey to find self-healing, luckily my husband knows some other dog handlers that are ex-military. So the veteran community has actually been using these entheogenic medicines for about a decade now with a lot of success. And through them, we were able to find a provider in Mexico. And after going through my own journey, I realized this is life changing. This is amazing medicine, not drugs. It's medicine. And I was angry. Why is this not available and accessible to everybody? So my husband and I started the S.I.R.E.N Project, which stands for Supporting Initial Responders with Entheogenic Networking. And just some history, entheogenic is a word that kind of is all encompassing because we don't always like to say plant medicine because it doesn't include all of the medicines like 5-MeO-DMT, which comes from the toad. So entheogenics kind of covers all the psychedelics. It doesn't quite have the connotation of the 60s psychedelic era. So we're changing, it's a little PR spin. We're changing the words to hopefully change the mindset on these quote unquote drugs because they are not, they are medicines. And I just think it's so interesting how something that comes naturally out of the earth is so taboo. And yet people without question will put man-made drugs into their bodies that have this laundry list of side effects, but that's okay because they're legal and they're not drugs, quote unquote.
So cool, and it's so interesting to me because I agree with you. The big pharma market with like all this synthetic crap that they give us and tell us is healthy, and for years people use natural medicine. Why do we shun it?
Mm-hmm. It's all it was there's a lot of conspiracy theories behind that as far as why back in the 60s they had that big just say no
Right.
to shut down all of these just peace, love, and drugs that were making people not want to go to war. So, and like I said, I'm pretty square. I've never done drugs in my life of any kind, and I'm pretty square. And I never thought that I would, fly myself to San Diego to jump in a van and smuggle myself across the border with a bunch of people I've never met to go do quote unquote drugs. But that's just where I was mentally. I was at a point where I had gone to some pretty dark places. I was not being a good mom. I was a single mom for the first 5 years of my son's life. Like I was just not coping, and I was desperate. I will do absolutely anything to find healing. So that's what I did. And luckily I found safe people who knew what they were doing and who were very skilled. And actually, the person I did my first journey with is our facilitator for our program. And she has a really unique background, which I can get into later. But I was super fortunate to find a trustworthy provider because they're not out there. And that's part of the other part of our mission is one, to make it accessible. Because do you know where to go to get these medicines? Know a reputable provider that's not going to just take your money and, not take care of you when you're under the medicine and help you prepare and help you integrate. That's hard to find and to know for sure they're legit. And some of these retreats in the States right now are $6,000 or $7,000 per retreat. Not everyone can afford that. And so our mission is, while we're doing this, we actually, by keeping it in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta specifically, it helps us, one, respect the roots of the medicine and the culture behind these therapies. It also helps keep it super affordable. And that's kind of our business plan right now, if you will.
Cool. So before we get into all the entheogenics, what actually made you decide to become a firefighter? Why did you get into this crazy life to start with?
Well, actually, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I actually signed in and signed the paperwork, swore in and everything to be a warrant officer in the Army to fly helicopters.
Mm.
And then before I shipped out, I broke my back on a dirt bike.
Oh,
And
no.
How?
yeah. In the military, you have to be pretty much perfect medically to fly. So
Right.
that disqualified me. And I'm like, well, I'm not shipping off now. So what am I going to do? Well, my whole life, I was a Division I and professional softball player. So I've been always physically active my whole life, and I've always had a team. And once I retired, got out of college, retired from the pros, I only played 1 year. I realized, wow, what do I do now? I don't have this team cohesion, don't have this team aspect. And so firefighting was a pretty easy transition. You still get to be outdoors, you still get to be active, and you have your crew that you do things with. And a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, so it fit the bill. I usually use it as a disclaimer because as a female in the fire service, your first assumption, or at least my first feeling is when you aren't doing well mentally, is you're just not tough enough. You need to suck it up. They're going to think you shouldn't be here. You can't make it. You're just a girl. And so I kind of fall back on just so you know, I could park a ball on a dime at almost 70 miles an hour in front of 2,000 people. I can handle pressure. I did it pretty well for about 20 years. That's how long I played. So I don't see why this should be too different, but in reality, it doesn't matter how tough you think you are. It's not natural to see some of the stuff that we see and to have to function through it. And our perception is, you can't break down and cry in the middle of a call. You got to suck it up. You have to be the strong one to support these people that are going through it. And that causes you to develop coping mechanisms that maybe aren't as healthy as they should be. Maybe some people were born with great parents who taught them great coping mechanisms. I don't know about you, but my parents were not child psychologists, so they weren't very versed in helping me build perfect coping mechanisms. And I think it's part of mental health when you think about, I'm going to go off on a tangent, bear with me. part of having PTSD is also have ADHD, so I do often lose my train of thought and it jumps the tracks regularly. So just bear with me. For most of us as firefighters and people in general, you try to eat right, you try to exercise, and you keep your body healthy. But what do you do every day to keep your mind healthy? What do you do for that? How often do people meditate or do breath work or practice being mindful? We're so enamored with the outside world, social media, everything that's going on around us. How often do you just stop and turn your brain inward? How does my body feel? How often have you sat at your desk and noticed your shoulders were in your ears and you're like, oh, I need to relax that? You're completely unaware of the tension in your body. And that is the core of most of our mental health issues. If you have anxiety or depression, when you're in crisis mode and you're at a 7, 8, 9, 10, you didn't just get there. You were slowly working your way up. You were unaware of the tension in your body and the way you were breathing. and then you're out of control. So all those coping mechanisms you have that can help you are going to work great when you're at a 2 or a 3. They're not going to do, pardon my language, but jack shit when you're at a 7 or an 8. So you need to be aware of, hey, I'm starting to spin. What am I telling myself right now? What is my inner dialogue? Is it positive? Is it negative? And how long have I been having these self-destructive thoughts? So that's every day people should be meditating. And that's what the plant medicine does, is it's like 20 years of meditation in about 5 or 6 hours. It's neuroplasticity, which is easier to do than to say.
Right. Hard word.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But it's part of how the medicine works, is it helps your brain regrow these neural connections, right? Because how do you walk? You don't think about it. You just do it, right? Have you guys ever read How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan? Highly recommend that book for anyone who's like freshly getting into the entheogenic psychedelic for medicine world. And it talks about the default mode network. Most of the stuff you do throughout the day, you don't consciously think about. It's kind of automatic, and that's a great energy efficient system to help you survive. You don't think about every step you take and the way you walk. There are neural connections from your brain to every part of your body that are hardwired, and you can do it without thinking. And it's the same thing in your mind. You have the lizard brain, and then you have the prefrontal cortex. There is a highway where they connect and talk to each other. This is going to kill me. Nope, that's just a shadow, right? There's a really quick connection where your brain figures that out. When people have depression, anxiety, or severe PTSD, post-traumatic stress, we like to say post-traumatic stress syndrome or injury, not disorder. The wiring is faulty. So you need to build new highways so that the lizard brain can connect to the prefrontal cortex in a healthier manner. So every time you have a negative thought, you need to stop yourself and go, nope. And you turn that positive. That is consciously rewiring your brain. And that's what the medicine helps you do. That's why the pre-work is so important. A lot of people think they're going to take these medicines and it's going to heal you. And that's not how it works. This is going to open a door you have to be able to walk through. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink unless you put the pre-work in. You have to be in what they call the right set and setting, the right mindset and the right setting. You have to feel safe in order to let your guard down to go and explore all the dark areas. But you have to have the right mindset going into it. Remember, you're rewiring your brain. So if you don't have the right mindset going into it, you're not going to have the framework of what you're trying to rebuild. So it's the pre-work and the integration afterwards are the most important part. You just have to think of your brain as wet paint. You know, you have to prepare for what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of information I just kind of threw at you.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And it's funny that you say that, because before you came on, Lorri and I were chatting, and we were like, yeah, I don't know how I would feel about this entheogenic journey. Like, and we were chatting about horses beforehand too. Like, I tell people, this is one of the reasons I've never worked with an animal communicator. Like, I don't know if I really want to know what my horses think. Just let that go.
Yeah.
So same thing, like you hear about people doing this psychedelics or entheogenics, and it's like, that could be scary. Like, how do you get I feel like some of us, maybe not everybody, but some of us, like, I would have to have confidence to be able to do that, because I'm not sure that I want to know what's in there at the very bottom, you know?
Well, that's where the set and setting come in, right? Like, you have to make sure you're safe and you have people around you that are going to keep you safe and help you grounded and help you get through. That's what your facilitators are supposed to do, is help give you confidence, help teach you how to be confident. I will flat out tell you, I did not have a great journey with the toad. Without getting into too much detail, because I don't want people to develop expectations, are the worst thing you can have going into the medicine. If you expect to get, my great grandmother's going to come in and bestow on me some infinite wisdom, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get what you expect. That being said, I can honestly tell you, I'm pretty sure I know what it feels like to suffocate and die. It was a horrible experience for me because I'm a control freak. and I couldn't let go as hard as I was trying to just let go. Imagine like you stub your toe really hard, and when there's like a 2-second delay before the real pain sets in, like you felt the sensation and it takes a second to hurt. When you do that, you have to, instead of tightening up and fighting it, as soon as it hurts, you got to let go. And it's a mind fuck, pardon my mouth, but it really is. When you realize as soon as you let go, it gets easier. And it's so hard for a control freak like me that's constantly trying to just, but it's teaching you a lesson, right? Just let go.
Fortunately, first responders are not control freaks.
I'm pretty sure we have a much higher occurrence of OCD and many other long letter acronyms in the fire service.
I'm sure.
ADHD, OCD.
All the alphabet.
Oh yeah, I think that's true for all public safety. And I also think that it's true for a lot of people that work with horses, especially competitive people. Oh my word. And that's one of the things that like I actually concentrate a lot on in my helping people is a lot of people come to me because they have like fear-based issues or they've got behavioral issues with their horses. And so again, it's retraining their brain to not have a response, right? When something happens that either frustrates them or scares them, getting rid of that immediate reaction and for a lot of them it is a total mind fuck because it's so ingrained in you. And so now you're kind of making that correlation for me, and I'm like, oh, like that's why it's so hard to let it go. And I know now that I've started to notice stuff, I'll walk around and I'll be like, God, that's why I get anxious, like, sitting down. And I sat down and watched a movie. I was sick last week, so I sat down and I watched a movie. It was only like an hour and 40 minutes, but I was still like, this is weird. I'm only watching one screen.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing anything else, and like every 15 minutes I'd be like, okay, sit
down. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. My husband laughs at me. He was like, you had the day off. You could have just sat down. I was like, nope, no, I can't. I'm wired to just I got to keep doing stuff. I got to keep moving. And that's the anxiety part, right? Like you need to make yourself sit still every once in a while and drive in the car without the radio on. Like I challenge everyone, try to not have constant stimulus. Try to not always be inundating your system with sounds and visuals, and just just try to find 5 minutes. If you can start your day that way, it will change your life. I promise you.
Yeah. And I talked to a firefighter who's out in Arizona who's starting something called the Foundation Fortified, and he's teaching mindfulness.
Nice.
And would like to teach it to recruits. Like that's his goal. It's like
that would be perfect. Honestly, right? That's something I was speaking on one of the other podcasts, because right now the suicide rate for firefighters specifically, I know my fire stats a little better than my PD, is that right now you're 3 times as likely to die by suicide than on-duty activities as a firefighter right now. I made a graph, I can send it to you later, and it shows from the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, and it shows suicides from 1887 till now. And granted, it's not super accurate. That was a long time ago, but they do research. And so sometimes when I update it, it'll update suicides up as far as like 20 years ago that just came in and just got verified. But it shows a steady incline from around 2000 to today. And right today, we are at 4 times as many suicides per year as we were in 2000. And the graph it doesn't like bounce around. It just makes this nice, steady sort of incline. And why? I can't tell you. I have my own theories as to why the suicides are 4 times what they were in 2000. But we teach all this stuff in academy of how to use hose and how to throw ladders and do CPR and all this other stuff and be physically fit and eat right and all this stuff. What are we teaching our recruits in academy about the mental health aspects of this and, life work balance, and which during COVID was non-existent. Like I couldn't schedule dentist appointments because I might get forced back and have to cancel them. It was so ridiculous during COVID.
Right.
That I'm sure that caused a lot of mental health issues. But why are we not taking these kids aside and teaching them about breath work and yoga and mindfulness as tools, because clearly we have a mental health crisis in America, period. And I think
Right.
it's really showing its colors, if you will, in the high pressure environments of first responders.
Yeah.
And none of the politicians are talking about it. I don't care who you think you're voting for, none of them are talking about it. And
Right.
it's an epidemic right now with the suicide rate. I don't know what to do other than
It is.
nonprofit, and
Like,
we're going to help the first responders.
yeah. So throw one of your theories out there. Why do you think that rate has increased?
I think a lot of it has to do with social media. It used to be you could turn on the news at night and see the horrible stuff and turn it off. And
Mhm.
now you're bombarded with negativity throughout the day. So the amount of negativity you experience throughout the day has increased. I feel like maybe the news wasn't always accurate or trustworthy, but I feel like with social media, what you're getting is more questionable, and that adds stress. I can't believe anything I'm reading. There's all this negative stuff and I don't really know what to believe. And as much as we try to be progressive and inclusive in the fire service and be a business model with where everyone's PR, they're all friendly words and terminology. I think a lot of people are scared to say the off-color jokes or to open up about anything because they might get in trouble or someone's going to judge them. And it's just a different environment now. Whereas back in the day, where fine, you had playboys in the bathroom and you said stuff that would politically not be correct, but you bonded. They were bonding. And I think maybe even dispatchers understand the off-color jokes that the rest of the people put in. And
Maybe.
yeah, no, I don't think we are bonding with our crew as well as we used to. And I think you need that support, even though we've done the critical incident stress debriefings and we've brought in all this mental health stuff to help. I feel like we're just not bonding the way we used to. We don't feel as supported as we used to. And so I think when someone is going through something, maybe they feel more isolated, possibly, potentially. I don't know. That's my theory.
I think that's a big part of it. And I think I heard you say on the other podcast I heard you on that something about like human resources is, helping to drive that wedge.
I feel like they are in every, like HR runs the fire service. HR runs the fire department in a lot of departments. Like the chief, I feel like is asking permission from them of what they can or cannot do. And that adds stress to your work environment, right? Like you're always afraid someone's going to do or say something or accuse you of something, and now you're going to get in trouble. So no one's opening up and bonding the way they used to. And I do think HR is a driving component of that lack of team cohesion.
Yeah. And I think, and you're probably, because where did you work? You worked in a big department.
We had 15
Right.
stations.
Yeah. So, I feel like the bigger your department or even the bigger your comm center, the more that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, in a smaller environment, things can get around quicker. You can, I don't know, I guess things get to the top faster. But I also feel like in that smaller environment, it's easier to do that, to have that bonding, to have those things. And I know where Lorri and I worked, we kind of watched our center get bigger and our fire department get bigger, right? Because when Lorri started, it was really small. When I was there, it was, growing. And then by the time we left, things hadn't doubled, but it was on that track, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that changes the environment a lot. And I know
Absolutely.
my husband is a deputy chief in a small fire department, and he's like, one of the first things that when he came in, had some problems, and he's like, hey, we can have chief conversations and we can have firefighter conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pick which one you want to have. You want me to talk to you like a firefighter, and do we want to work this out, or do we need to do the HR route?
Okay. We call that a dumpster talk. Let's go out back by the dumpster and have a conversation, which I prefer. If you're having an issue with me, let's just have a conversation about it. Let's not go tell mommy and daddy. Like, let's,
Right.
but the way the system is set up, like every captain's test I took was, oh, this is a, what they call a tennis ball issue. We're going to bounce this right up the chain
Oh,
because
God.
you don't want the liability. There's so many officers who don't want the liability of having a personal conversation with somebody.
Right.
And then maybe later on they didn't get the result they wanted. And now they're getting written up because they didn't bounce it up the chain. And
Right.
and how do you build a relationship with someone when you know, okay, this officer who wants to help me is obligated to bounce this up the chain and include other people that I don't really want included. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not a great dynamic. The business world is not a great dynamics for first responders.
It is
No.
not. It is not. And I think too, social media and also just communication these days, like texting, plays a huge role because I think younger people have a harder time with those personal conversations and that face-to-face interaction,
Mhm.
and that makes it
They
harder.
don't know how to talk to people. One of the
Right.
problems.
Well, I mean,
They're
as a
texting their
communications
whole life.
major, you know that the content of what you're saying is only like 10% of the message. The other
Right.
90% of what you're saying is in your body language, your tone of voice, your cadence,
Mm-hmm.
like everything else is what's you are communicating with everything other than the words you're saying. Like there's a huge difference
Right.
between, oh, I'm fine versus I'm fine. Those are polar
Yeah.
opposites.
Yes.
And we miss
Yes.
that on
Very
text.
much
How
so.
often
Yes.
is something bounced up to HR or, documented in an email or text and it's totally misread and you're not getting the point. You're not getting the humanistic part of the conversation for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we see that a lot, especially trying to teach young people how to talk on the phone, and they don't have a clue.
Right.
Yeah,
What to
so
listen for in a voice they don't know.
right. And then also to not I feel like they don't understand a lot of times the tone and the cadence and the inflection because of course we can't see you, but you know the difference. You start to learn the difference between, somebody who's panicked or, you know, like you learn that tone of voice, right? So you can
You can tell when someone is
judge.
urgent or
Right,
just needing to talk to somebody.
right,
Yeah.
or they're just
Yeah.
pissed off, right? Like sometimes it's like it's not an emergency, they just need to vent because they're pissed off. But that's same thing with humans, right? Sometimes when we're working together, we snap or we whatever, and we just need to vent. It doesn't need to go to HR,
Right,
is
right.
my point.
And I think that goes a lot to what you're saying about the size of a department. My husband's department, they have 5 stations. And so my
Mhm.
department's 3 times as big. San Jose, they have people, when we would do mutual aid training with them, they would be introducing themselves for the first time. Like 2 different rigs would show up and they'd never met each other.
Right.
So you can't build when you're huge, you have the potential to work with so many different people. And if you don't have a regular crew, you're not going to bond with them. But then there's such a potential to work with people you don't know, and it's more difficult to be with someone in a high stress situation when you don't know them. Like my crew, when I left, I'd been with them for years, and it adds a comfort to the call, believe it or not, under stress, because I know what they're capable of and I know what they're thinking next. And that removes a little of the anxiety when I'm not like, as an EMT, I need to understand my medic and what he wants or what he's going to want. And I have to be able to anticipate that and
Right.
not, because if you do something wrong, the medic's going to get mad at you. Well, my other medic would have done this way. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it reduces the stress on a call when you're like, oh, I know JP's got this. I know Mike's got that. It really makes the call run more smoothly. So just having a more consistent crew and getting to know each other just makes the call, it brings the overall stress level down of the call for sure.
Definitely.
Mhm. Agreed. So you were talking earlier about having a bad experience with one of the entheogenics. How do people decide what to use? Like how do you go through that process? Like because there's several options, right? It's not just
There are. So what we use in the S.I.R.E.N Project is psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And that's a group setting, which adds to the set and setting part, right? Because you will find that we are all connected, and that becomes very evident when you're under the medicine. And you just have to trust me until you try it. The toad 5-MeO-DMT is done on an individual basis. It has it's an intense ride. It's like getting hit by a train, unless you're other people with less control issues. And I've been told it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful experience ever. And oh, really? That's great. Great for you.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take your word for that.
Yes,
You
thank you.
rainbow
Thank you
people,
very
right?
much, because
Yes.
I know what it feels like to suffocate and die. So, so that's what we use. I really feel like that's a great combination for someone who's never done it before. Psilocybin is pretty gentle. It's pretty easy on the system, but it still has the neuroplasticity components. If my husband was here, he'd be telling you about the spiritual part of it and the connection, and how the spirit of the medicine is in you and it's helping to heal you. And that's what Andrea, who I'll get into later, our facilitator, she's the spirit of all of this, and how it's helping to heal you is it adds to the setting of the medicine. I personally, I do believe in higher power. I need the science. So that's where I go. So psilocybin is much gentler. I think the toad really helps kind of make it all come together. That's my personal opinion. As far as the entheogenics that I'm aware of, we prefer natural. So MDMA is not natural. Doesn't have there's no spirit to it. There's no indigenous cultural setting to go with it. So I think it's missing something when you go into a sterile room with some guy in a white lab coat who's going to watch you and take notes while you're under all by yourself. That is not conducive to what these medicines are doing to your brain. They're helping you feel connected to everyone and everything. And that is a huge factor if you're going into crisis and you're having an issue, to have that feeling of, I'm okay. I'm connected to this tree. I'm connected to this person. That is so grounding when you're in a moment of crisis. And I don't think you're going to get that aspect in your setting for a lot of these unnatural medicines. That being said, two other natural medicines that can be used are ayahuasca and ibogaine. So ayahuasca is another derivative, another type of DMT. So DMT is in your system naturally. If you do intense breath work, you can release it and get a similar sensation to being on the toad or ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is known as the grandmother, and it's a longer experience than the toad, but it kind of comes in waves, and it's also very gentle. You will probably purge in some form, probably by throwing up, which is not enjoyable. I had a bad ayahuasca experience, which I'll get into later, with not the provider we have. I was a guinea pig for another provider closer here in California that I thought we could try out. It's right here, and I will never use anyone other than our provider ever again. So, and then you have ibogaine. So ibogaine is the one that VETS uses. So VETS is the nonprofit for veterans to go and do these medicines, and they use ibogaine. Ibogaine is great if you have a traumatic brain injury. So I don't know if you ever watched the movie with Will Smith and the football players. I forget what it's called. They talked about all the traumatic brain injury, the repetitive brain injuries cause these little tiny blood clots in the brain. And that's what causes them to have a lot of the issues that they have later in life. So when you have traumatic brain injuries, you need something a little stronger to help kind of push through and around those blockages. And that's what ibogaine does. It is a very heavy lift. It is known as the grandfather. It is very difficult for people to go through. I don't recommend it unless you have a lot of demons, you've tried all the other ones, and you just need something stronger, or if you have traumatic brain injuries, then I would recommend ibogaine. But I would try ayahuasca again. I probably should, because my one experience was so bad. There's a lot you can learn from it, but then there's the theory that once it's in you forever, and you shouldn't need to go back. If the spirit is in you, once you've done it and the spirit is in you, you shouldn't need to go back. But people do. Maybe they want to go back and learn more. But if you use all your tools and your mindfulness and your journaling and your yoga and your breath work, you can bring yourself back to where you were the first time and what you learned. Is that a little too detailed? Does that explain a little bit?
No, that's great.
Yeah, that explains a lot. Yes.
Yeah, so talking about the spiritual side of it, how do you get past that with the sciencey people like yourself? How do you get past the the stigma and the woo woo.
The granola and Birkenstocks.
Yes, exactly.
I call it. I am not granola and Birkenstocks. I am not. My husband probably is. When you look at maps, for example, and they just were trying to get MDMA passed through the FDA, which it did not. Unfortunately, we're kind of hoping psilocybin can ride the coattails of MDMA since they've put so much time and money into it. But that's all science based. Like you don't see anyone pushing MDMA who's into the spirit of the medicine because it's synthetic. There's a lot of science out there. They've done so much research to show what it's doing to help the brain. And you can see when someone takes it, I think it's an MRI, CAT scan, whatever, when they're on the medicine, how it lights up different parts of the brain and you're using other parts of the brain. And there's been a few studies from Harvard and Stanford and Johns Hopkins that show it's more effective than SSRIs. So
Wow.
even if you don't understand the science behind how it's rewiring the brain, the studies are showing no, it's working better than therapy 3 times a week and SSRIs. They're having the efficacy for like a year after these treatments, you have like a 60% rate of people still not clinically depressed.
Yes.
Whereas on the other therapies, it could be as low as 20 or 30%. So it's
Yeah.
showing to be twice as effective, if not more, than conventional therapies. And that's what's just so mind blowing to me and why the FDA wouldn't approve it. Another one out there I forgot to mention is ketamine. It is legal and it is being used. It is a psychedelic. The problem with ketamine is one, again, it's not natural. And 2, you're in a sterile room with a guy in a lab coat, so that I don't think you're going to get as much out of it. But the bigger part that I've been told, because I've never done it, is it's a dissociative. And what if first responders already learn how to do? Is dissociate. And there are therapists out there who will tell you, oh no, you just need the right coach that can help you navigate through that so you don't dissociate and to help you get through it. And maybe that's true. I've never done that. But again, I like to stick to the ones that I know and feel comfortable with that have proven to work. And if you're really sciencey, just Google it, do some research. And there's a ton out there to show, no, this is working better than everything out there. Spirit aside.
Yeah, I mean the research on SRIs has been out there. They're only like max 30% effective.
They're not great.
So why? I don't know why they're so pushed.
They keep pumping them out though. Yeah, that's what
Oh
I'm
yeah,
saying.
they pop them out like crazy.
I want to say the drug industry makes like what 10 billion a year, something like that. I'm pulling a number out, but I'm sure it's in the billions on antidepressants.
Higher than 10.
Right. And that's why MDMA didn't pass FDA approval, because what pharmaceutical company is going to put in the money to get this drug out there if you need it once?
Right. Do you think the other reason it didn't pass is maybe because of like I'm a baby boomer. I'm at the very end of the boomers. And, I grew up in the 60s and early 70s. So I'm picturing, Haight-Ashbury,
the psychedelic era and the people on drugs, and for sure, 100%. The connotation
there.
Yeah, the connotation is there, and you definitely have the generation right before Just Say No and Dare that's conditioned to see it as the hippies that are going to sit around and do nothing and not contribute to society and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, they were onto something with the peace and love and flowers. They really were onto something. Why do I think it didn't pass? I think it didn't pass for a number of reasons. One, the FDA requires parameters on their testing that include a placebo. And it's really hard to run an effective test when you're giving some people MDMA and other people a placebo, because you know pretty quickly which one you got. It's hard to convince somebody that they got MDMA when you gave them a placebo and vice versa. So they couldn't run a valid test, quote unquote, valid test per the FDA. That's what they're hanging their hat on, is that you couldn't get the valid placebo test through to validate that this is actually working up against a placebo. My other conspiracy theory thought is that, again, if people start taking this medicine and feel better, the drug industry is going to lose billions of dollars. And there's a lot of money behind that to push not to make it legal. I mean, how many lobbyists were probably paid how much money to push against this? That's my thought.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, that's probably true because with the natural meds, you're going to get, like you said, one and done, as opposed to one a day or one every other day or whatever they're,
The
whatever the
rest of your
dosage
life.
they're on.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting to me because, again, I don't fully understand the financial or the business side of this, but you would think the insurance companies would be saying, yes, I don't want to pay for your drugs for the rest of your life. How about we saving money on the insurance side? And because insurance companies have money, why are they not paying for the other side? If you can get this medicine through, you're going to save money on therapy. You're going to save money on medicine. I just feel like there must be some sort of agreement behind the
Like
curtain
they're
between.
getting incentive money, I think. And I know doctors do.
Yeah, they
They
do.
get
Push a certain
in,
drug, they do. Yeah.
right. So, yeah, maybe that's why, but that's definitely something that I think we have to, as a
That's for another
society,
podcast. You need to interview somebody that's in that world that can understand why is it the insurance companies aren't
right.
pushing for this medicine to save themselves money? What are they getting that
What are
they're
they
willing
getting?
to
Yeah.
pay for drugs?
And it's
Yeah.
so funny because there's so many things. I mean, it's not even this stuff, but preventative care in general.
Mhm.
Why don't they pay for it? Why? Why do we have to go through all of this to
Here's a little funny thing. So I'm right now in a certification program through UCSD for integrative nutrition because while you do all this stuff to help your mind heal and you eat right and you exercise, sometimes when you're in fight or flight for so long and you're in chronic stress and you throw off your cortisol and all your other stress hormones, guess what? It damages some of the other hormones. You actually need cortisol, believe it or not.
yeah,
And when you're in constant flight or flight, you can burn out your adrenal glands. And then you have this chronic fatigue issue because you don't have cortisol in the morning. Your levels need to be at like 12 or 14. I think at one point mine were as low as 1.4 in the morning.
Oh,
So while we hear cortisol, we think bad. Well, yeah, a rush of cortisol constantly, adds to gaining weight in the midsection, which, lack of sleep also raises your cortisol, all these other issues. Cortisol is not a bad thing. It's like cholesterol. Your body needs some cholesterol. Your body
right.
needs some cortisol.
well,
So
cholesterol feeds the brain. So,
yeah, cholesterol. Yeah, sterols do a lot for your whole system. And I can get into that later, but that's part of what I'm learning about is trying to figure out how to help heal the body and give it what it needs. Because really, when you look back at Chinese culture and Ayurvedic medicine, they align a lot, and they've been around for thousands of years. About first, use food. You need to use the stuff you're using to feed your body to heal your body. That is your first line of defense. And yet, most doctors are only given a 4-hour course on nutrition. They're taught to diagnose and prescribe. Other than get outside and be active and eat right, they don't really do they put together a diet plan? Are they telling you specifically what foods you should be eating to help with your situation? They don't have that education. And that's mind boggling to me when you think about how much of your health is dependent on everything you eat every single day. Doctors are not for preventative, they're for putting band-aids on. They don't, I mean, really, how often do they cure things? Maybe with penicillin. But for the most part, I don't
well,
feel like
relates to
doctors
that.
cure anything. They just give you, hypertension meds and cholesterol meds and all this other stuff. It blows my mind that we don't have more education for doctors for preventative medicine.
Right. And then
Well,
when you talk about nutrition, how terrible is most of the food that's on the market in the US?
Yeah. Yeah.
I lived in Europe for years and it's stuff you can't even get
Oh,
there. It's
no.
illegal.
Yeah, that's what blows my mind. So part of the research I was doing was on food coloring and how it does create behavioral issues in children independent of ADHD diagnosis, which means that the food coloring alone is causing behavioral issues in kids, even kids who don't have ADHD. And yet it's allowed in everything. When you look at Quaker oatmeal, they were showing strawberries and cream flavor, and you look at the ingredients list for America versus Europe,
It's
they are
crazy.
totally different.
Mhm.
It's the same
mhm.
company, and yet the formula is different because all this stuff is not allowed in the food in Europe.
Mhm.
It blows my mind how we're not I mean, you don't think the stuff you're putting in your body, food as well as thoughts, right? The
Mhm.
thoughts that you have every day, the food, although everything is you're consuming, your thoughts, your food, everything you're putting in your body every day has an effect on it. And it really is astonishing that doctors don't have more training.
Well, there's a guy I follow on Instagram, Josh from England, and he comes over here a lot. And he went back home and he said, "I'm going to weigh myself because everybody says the food's so bad in the United States and this and that." And he had gained like 25 pounds while he
Oh yeah,
was over here. And he said, "But I didn't eat anything different. But all the additives, all the sugar, all the everything that we have in the
inflammation.
yeah."
Inflammation is the core of every health issue. Every
Yes.
health issue you can mention starts with inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're
Yeah.
kind of, as Americans, in a chronic state of it. So,
Oh,
Yes.
we're 2/3 of our population is overweight or obese. It is the first time in the history of the world there are more people who are overweight than starving.
that's insane. And could that be part of the mental health crisis?
Absolutely.
You
I
know?
don't feel good right now. I'm going to go have a donut because this donut does love me back, and I'm happy for a good 30 seconds while I'm eating it. Absolutely. And that's part of it, where our environment is not set up for health. I mean, everywhere you go, you're being marketed to for fast food and all this unhealthy stuff. So it's a difficult battle for anyone who's unhealthy or overweight. It is an uphill battle, and you need help because it's really difficult to navigate all the marketing that's constantly you're being bombarded with for all the unhealthy stuff.
Well, I think if somebody would spend the money and do the research, I think that, and I have no background in medicine or anything like that, but I think they'd find that the ADHD, ADD, maybe even autism comes from all the additives we have in food these days. Because when I was growing up, back in the dark ages with dinosaurs, yes, um, and we didn't have all the additives,
Mhm.
we didn't have all these diseases.
You had lead in the paint.
Well, that,
Yeah.
Yeah. That was what you had.
yeah,
Lead
that was
in
a
the paint.
snack for the middle of the night when you woke up, so you didn't have to wake
Yeah.
up mom's dad. You know?
The baby's
But
cribs that they're gnawing on.
right, absolutely, yeah. But we didn't have any. We didn't have these additives. You know, we had the milk came delivered. It was delivered fresh every day.
Well, I think it was Michael J. Fox that said, genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
Yes,
So it's interesting when
correct.
part of what I'm learning about is many of the disorders people have, and while some people are affected by it and other people's aren't affected by whatever the ingredient is the genetic component. And you could have a gene, but if it's not expressed, then you're going to be okay. So what is it in your environment that's causing those genes to activate, that's developing these issues? You can have the gene for breast cancer, but maybe you alter your diet and your environment and then you never get it. So I think it's a twofold. The whole nature versus nurture for who you become. I think it's also the same when it comes to disease. Some of us are predisposed to gain weight in our midsection. That is so much unhealthier than, the hips and the thighs. So there's no cookie cutter answer, I think is what I'm trying to say. There's no like
Oh,
this is the cause. It could be multiple aspects, and it's so dynamic. I honestly don't think they're ever going to be able to pinpoint it because it's so hard to test for, oh, this food coloring caused a behavioral issue. Okay, how many of those kids had a gene, or how many of them didn't have a gene and it was purely the food coloring?
Right.
It makes
yeah,
it, I don't envy the
billions,
scientists.
not trillions, to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what one piece of advice would you give someone who's new or considering a career in public safety?
No, I'm just kidding.
I think that's what we all said.
Someone's got to do it. I get that. Someone's got to do it. No, I would say if you're going to get into public safety, I really hope you played a team sport, because the people who come into this world, into this environment that never played team sports, you stick out like a sore thumb. You have to learn how to work as a team and communicate as a team and push yourself, be able to push through physically and push through stressful times and push through losses. That's all sports stuff. So I know you said only one thing, but I talk way too much for just one.
You can go with multiple. I just,
Yeah.
I was going to give you the opportunity to just say one.
Oh, I would say if you didn't play team sports, start now. Get out there and start some team sports if you're young. And the other, eat right and take on a holistic, and I don't mean woo-woo granolas and Birkenstocks holistic approach. I mean whole body, which includes what you eat, what you consume, both spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. What are you consuming and putting into your body? And then what are you doing for yourself overall, activity and staying active and healthy? And how do you cope with your stress? You need to develop healthy habits to keep your body and your mind stable and sane.
Very true. I
Right.
think that is so important. I think we definitely need to be teaching recruits that, whether,
Absolutely.
whatever aspect, oh my goodness, whatever aspect of public safety you're getting into. And then I think that we also need to do a better job at reaching out to families and, helping them, because when you have responders that have issues, right? When they start to have things come up at work or whatever, if you don't know how to support them, and the same thing if you're a military family, it's another huge
For sure.
missed population. But it's like we need to do that better at reaching out and
Absolutely.
supporting each other and not being judgmental, not
I think
being
it's left
snarky.
I think it's being left to the individual, right? Like the spouses and the families at home. It's your responsibility to network and bond with the other spouses and create your own little support network. And that, I think that's a great idea for that to maybe be facilitated a little better. Part of
Yes.
the S.I.R.E.N Project is we send all first responders, including dispatchers, and their families, because again, it's a holistic approach. You need to eat healthy, you need to think healthy, you need to be mindful, but we also need to make sure your whole support network is also healthy and safe and sane, right? So if you have this spouse that's been trying to hold space for you to keep you from being triggered because you're having such a hard time and now you're better, they may realize this huge void of I'm not okay because I've been holding space for you for so long. And that's what we're trying to heal. We want to heal the whole family unit. We have a guy who was divorced and he's back together with his wife now. Like we truly believe in the whole family unit because that's what's going to help. That's what's held you together. That's what's kept you here on this planet long enough to save yourself. That deserves healing as well. You want the whole family to be better. So we send spouses as well. But I love your idea of somehow creating a support network for the families. I don't know how to do that. If that would be like a department thing, like each department needs to have a spouses list so they can contact each other. That'd be a great idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. My husband, department he worked at before was a small department, and he was also a volunteer. He started out volunteering as a firefighter. So those two departments they were very good at that, right? I mean, it was family. But I see, a trend away from that. So, and I think it's unfortunate. And I know in the comm center, if you're friends with your coworkers, you ask about their family or they'll bring their families in sometimes. But otherwise, there's no mention of anything. There's no
That
family
whole dynamic.
activities.
It's the whole dynamic I was talking
Right.
about with the increase of mental health and the increase of suicides and the lack of cohesion. Like back in the day, 20 years ago, you knew their family, you knew their kids. You maybe had gone to the birthday parties of your coworkers' children. And that's just why are we used to be personal with each other and that's gone. Is that social media? Is that HR? Is it Gen Z? Who's the newest millennial? I don't know what the generations are. I'm Gen X, so I don't know all the
Me
new.
too. So yeah.
Yeah, like is it a generational thing? Is it a technological thing causing us to be less personal with each other? I don't know. That's over my head, but it's definitely there's something there. Why are we not so personal? Why is that? Why the suicides are going up? We feel less connected with each other. I
I
guarantee you,
think
it's like
I think that that's a very good. Yeah, that's very, very high likelihood of that. It's like, with the social media, there's more connection, but less connection.
right.
So,
There's more information, but less
yes,
connection.
less connection. Right. All right. So, before we wrap it up, tell us about the S.I.R.E.N Project experience.
Like what a day.
You have a little bit, but like go
Okay.
into.
So we have these retreats down in Puerto Vallarta. It will take about 5 days. You fly in, you stay at a hotel, and then we get you a van and we bus everyone out to the location. And from there, you stay at a house and everything is covered. The medicine, the food, everything is covered. It's a very indigenously respectful ceremony for all of the medicines, but you don't just go there and do medicine. We do mindfulness techniques and breath work. And then as a group, we talk about our experiences and our issues and things that we've been through, because we are all connected. You're going to hear me say that over and over again. And you need to feel connected to other people. And that means you need to be able to open up and talk about things and help each other out. And we have some tribes that go through and they are so close knit afterwards, because it really is a vulnerable experience. And so you bond with people the way we're not bonding in the firehouse anymore. And so you go through the medicine, and then we have a little beach or vacation day on the last day, and then you go home. But before you ever come to the retreats, we do several group meetings as well as individual meetings to help prepare you, help you get yourself in the right mindset to get the most out of the medicine. We also have what we call a dieta we recommend, of getting off of the sugar and off the caffeine and the nicotine and the alcohol and some of the less healthier dietary practices that people have. And we have a medical screening. So we have a nurse practitioner that does a background, because these medicines are not for everybody. There are certain disorders that people shouldn't do these medicines, and certain medications you can't be on. We feel it's unsafe. So that's part of the intake. And then while you're there, we actually have a doctor and a nurse practitioner that do an EKG and check your blood pressure. If you're super hypertensive, it's probably not safe to take these medicines. So we make sure medically everyone is physically safe to take the medicines. Then after you go home, we're going to have several other group meetings and individual meetings for integration, because this is the big part, trying to take this wet paint in your brain and help it kind of dry in the new highways that you need, that you've worked so hard to build, and trying to figure out how to realign your new thought processes with the habit of your old space that you've been in and your routine that you normally have. How do you alter that so you don't lose what you've worked so hard for? And so we have several group meetings to help people talk about how they're doing now that they've been home, how they're adapting, how things are going, and how to work through issues together as a group and individually. We also then migrate people over into an alumni group. So we have a signal chat running where all the people who've been through the medicine get to talk to each other. And they have every other month a check-in meeting for people to come in together. Because again, we're all connected and we want to stay connected and make sure everyone still feels supported. It's not like, oh, you've had your medicine, cool, you're on your own. No, we're still here. We're still going to work together to get you through. We have some amazing participants that have gone through, some amazing alumni that have taken a leadership role and kind of like helping the newbies kind of acclimate. So it's a wonderful little community that we've built, and we need funding. We've done pretty well the first couple of years, but we are growing, and it is really hard for me to get someone on the phone that's emergent, and I have to tell them it might be a year out. So I have an extensive wait list, and we are trying our best. But if anyone's out there listening, it's S.I.R.E.N We absolutely need funding. That's in a nutshell.
Wow. It sounds amazing. And
It
tell us
does. It
about
sounds like we
your
should all be
your
there.
facilitator.
Oh, Andrea. So Andrea
Yeah.
Lucy, she worked in the States for about 30 years with the military at the NICO, the Center of Excellence, the Marcus Institute. She helped start that. So she has she's a doctor of, I think, mind-body medicine. And so she's been helping people, Marines usually, with their TBIs and their post-traumatic stress for 30 years. So she has this extensive Western medicine background, but then her grandparents were curanderas. She's from Chile. So she grew up in the medicine, and she returned to Mexico to continue her journey with her dynamic background and bring the Western medicine doctorate knowledge to the medicine history and the spirit together. And she just is this perfect blend of knowledge and insight, and she facilitates all of it. She has a medicine man that she uses, and she has the doctor and the facility we use, and she just brings it all together like nobody I've ever seen.
She sounds wonderful.
She is.
Cool. All right, Lorri, any questions? Anything
No,
crazy
none.
come to mind?
No, it sounds like we all need to go though.
Let's
I
say
know.
the baby
Sounds
boom.
like we all need to go.
Yeah.
So what
Absolutely.
is the best way, Angela, that people can find out about the S.I.R.E.N Project and support you?
So we have social media. We have Instagram and we have Facebook. But the best way is if you go to our website, we have little icons so you can find us on the social media. But the website is thesirenproject.org, one long word. And that way you can apply, you can find out more information, you could donate, or you could click onto our social media. We also have on the website mindfulness techniques for people just looking for ways to try to help themselves. We have a whole list of reading recommendations that I just updated, which I'm really excited about because one, it's putting out information for people like you guys that just want to know a little bit more, they're kind of dabbling in it, people who maybe want to help themselves, because I highly encourage mindfulness techniques and breath work without the medicine if that's too scary to you. But if you go to our website and pulled up the recommended reading list, there's a link that takes you to Amazon. And if you buy a book, audio or paperback, we get a little kickback.
Nice. I will keep that in mind because I love
I
my
love it.
Audible stuff.
Yes.
I can't sit still and read. I do all books on audio.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been so cool and so informational. And we will put out the word because I think it's a great project to support.
I really appreciate this platform and you guys reaching out and the opportunity to share a project and what we're doing.
Cool. Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. It's not evening there yet, but
No.
yeah.
Pick up my son here in a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you,
All right.
Angela.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Till next time, y'all. Bye.
All right. Bye.